Hey, True Believers. Today we're going over Alpha Flight Issue 2. The print date on this was September 1983. And this book gives a lot of great little tidbits. We get some origin story on Marina, some great follow-up story on James Hudson and his exosuit, which we will go over in just a few minutes. But I love the way that they build this story up. And I've talked about how modern writers just don't capture that essence of storytelling like a lot of the old school ones do. But before we dive into that, let's talk about who made this book. This is John Byrne, story and art, Tom Orzanowski doing the lettering, Andy Yankus doing the colors, Denny O'Neil editor, and Jim Shooter editor-in-chief. So we have an all-star cast on this story. Now listen to the way this is built up. 20 miles south and west of Fort Albany, Ontario, lies a vast, undeveloped area you will not find on any map. It is the ultra-top secret Albany River proving grounds where most of Canada's top-secret military weaponry is tested. But it is not a military weapon which now streaks across the mid-morning sky. It is a man. A man whose present role is ill-suited to his natural temperament. He's a scientist, a researcher, and disinclined to the heroic mold into which fate has cast him. His name is James MacDonald Hudson, but to the world at large, he's better known as Vindicator, and so that's what they're calling him right now. And you come to find out that they're doing their version of what you call a danger room session. So they're out in the open, and it's interesting to see how they're kind of out of practice since Department H was shut down, and this is their first time back together since. But you can kind of see how they care about each other and how they give each other a hard time. Like Sasquatch gets drenched by Marina, and Puck's just like, I knew there was a reason for coming on this training exercise, eh? I mean, I don't need any training, but I sure did need to see that. And he's like, Puck, you sawed-off little, come here and we'll see if you're as resilient as your namesake. But listen to the way that they introduced Guardian. I know right now it's Vindicator, but that's another little tidbit we'll get into in a minute. And you can see how they care for one another nonetheless. Now listen here. James is talking about how there's a lot that he personally needs to vindicate. And Michael, Two Young Men, Shaman says, I'm just sorry Anne was tied up with our CMP duties. I'd love to see Snowbird get more involved in these free-for-alls. She needs to loosen up. Perhaps, old friend. But she is not human, and you are, and you too could use some cheer. It's not that easy, Michael. I've never wanted to be a group leader. I don't think I have what it takes to be a superhero. In fact, on my very first venture, I nearly killed a civilian, which was back in X-Men 109. That still weighs heavy on my conscience. It's a lot for me to have to vindicate. And then Michael kind of says, you are our leader. You are our own Captain America, James. You represent the nation. And while you may feel you have much to vindicate, Canada does not. You're suggesting my name should be more in keeping with our image, like Guardian. And I love how, even though Byrne hated Vindicator, he at least respected it and showed organically how Guardian came to have his namesake here. It's just a really nice little tidbit. Now we jump into Marina. Something happens to her in the midst of all this training, and something happens to Puck after she says, don't touch me, and she takes off into the water. So there's time is of the essence in order to heal him, and everyone's on the trail to see where she went and what is going on. They don't know if she's been manipulated or what. And that's kind of what the whole book focuses on here. And we also get some internal struggles with Snowbird. And yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how this leads up and how her being a superhero starts to complicate her personal life, especially since she works for the military. Now, moving on. Again, it seems like a simple issue, but I mean, look at the pay attention to the detail of the art, the way that the way the story flows. It just, there's another level to it. It feels more like you're reading a novel in terms of the way, like the level of, I can't think of the word I'm trying to say, but just the way it's presented instead of like when you read certain books and they're just like, oh my God, that's like LMFAO, so funny. Here, it feels a little more interesting. Like the way it's built up here, where when we get the backstory of Marina, it says the Mary D was a small fishing trawler and it had no business being out that night in one of the worst storms to hit the Atlantic coast in more than a generation. The captain's thrown overboard. He was a strong swimmer and might have not fared too badly, but the swirling seas tangled him hopelessly in the nets and the skinners pulled him down. Then a light. Metaphors of drowning men clutching at straws will be redundant. He was indeed a drowning man, though the object he now clutched was certainly no straw. It pulsed and glowed in his hands, alive, and most surprisingly freed from the mire of the bottom. It buoyed quickly to the surface. I don't see that quality of writing very much anymore in terms of description. You're not bored. Everything flows. And you kind of understand how Marina was accepted in her communities, which was a little cringy to a degree, but I don't want to give it away. I want you guys to read it. It's interesting how she grew up essentially as a human and how she was indoctrinated into Department H and later Alpha Flight. Now that ends on a cliffhanger, and then we get a backstory. It's called Alpha Flight, the origins, in the beginning. And what I like here is if you go back and look at the review that we did for the Alpha Flight one-shot, I love how the writers and artists of that book paid attention to the exosuit here. Because even though it's gold here, the one that they used in the book was silver. And James here is frustrated because he's working for Amchem. And he just found out that his friend Jerry, who's kind of like the main advisor of this research center he works for, is selling his designs to the American military. And he is furious. All that work, 4 years of my life, and for what? I designed this suit to increase the efficiency in exploration and development. Now the military will use it to blow the blazes out of Southeast Asia. It just isn't fair. Why must science constantly be perverted by the warmongers? Well, this time it isn't going to happen. I'll bloody well see to it. And what he does with the exosuit, you can see why he got into a lot of hot trouble. Hot water with Amchem. But it's interesting nonetheless. And I can't wait to pick up issue 3 to see how Heather, his future wife, gets him out of hot water. The story flows. I wasn't bored. This has action, drama, and character development. Everything that you want in a comic book that just doesn't feel shallow or superficial. Maybe some of the things that they talk about are dated, but still feels kind of timeless instead of a lot of these modern books where they use a lot of modern slang like, no cap, dead ass. And maybe that's just my age showing, but I love books that make you think. And the way that this book flows, you can very much see how John Byrne was inspired by Chris Claremont in terms of writing. So with that said, guys, if you've enjoyed what you've seen, please, first and foremost, support your local comic shop or wherever it is you like to pick up your books and grab a copy of this or the collected trade of Alpha Flight. And if you've enjoyed this review, we really would appreciate if you take a moment to hit like, share, and subscribe. Helps the club channel more than you could possibly know. And if you wouldn't mind hitting that fancy little Sasquatch bell next to subscribe, that way as we continue to upload content, you guys get notified. Come to the channel, and we love talking with y'all and hearing your thoughts and feedback down in the comments below or social media pages, which I'll make sure to leave the links down in the description. So with all that said, I hope y'all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, true believers.